The holidays are here at the Home Depot, so let's get to decorating. Find your perfect tree in our huge assortment of shapes, sizes, and styles. Like the easy-to-assemble Jackson Noble fir, with pre-lit branches perfect for styling with all your favorite ornaments. Or the Flock Starry Light Fraser fir, with over 1,900 pre-lit memory wire branches that keep their shape so it's ready right out of the box. Ooh. Find the perfect tree now at the Home Depot.
Hello and welcome to week 13 of Jets Final Drive. I'm your host, Jeane, Coakley, and we've got both the Connors here today, so we're talking a big show. We got our NFL insider, Connor Hughes, and we have our Jets analyst, Aaron Rodgers. Hey guys, thanks for joining me. No better way to start the month of December off than talking Jets with you two.
Always happy to be back. Thanks for having me.
We always enjoy you, Connor. Yeah, Connor Rodgers, not Connor Hughes, because he's too busy
I figured
texting
that
over
one.
there. All right, well, just a reminder,
trying to post
guys.
our link.
I know. Good job, Connor Hughes. All right, just a reminder, you can find the audio version of Jets Final Drive on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. All right, guys, so the Jets went up early to the Seahawks, clicking on offense, defense, and even special teams. They built a 21-7 lead after a thrilling 99-yard kickoff return, but unfortunately, they couldn't hold on to that lead and couldn't finish out before they fell to Geno Smith and the Seattle Seahawks 26-21 after another failed final drive led by Aaron Rodgers. All right, we're going to start with you, Aaron Rodgers. Jeff Albrecht said they will continue to start Aaron Rodgers. But at 3-9, do you think the Aaron Rodgers experiment is now over? Should he start?
It's over. I think they don't want to embarrass him at this point. That's why they won't just bench him right now, Jeane. I think eventually when this happens at some point over the next couple of weeks, they'll come out with the injuries that have been bothering him, and that'll be the reason for sidelining him, rather than just, outright, embarrassing a future Hall of Famer for poor performance. And I think ultimately, though, if you were just going on performance and he didn't have the kind of resume and clout that he has, he would be taking a seat on the bench. When you go back and watch the Jets film of the last couple of weeks, and honestly a large majority of this year, you can't sit there and say Aaron Rodgers is the only problem, but you could certainly say he is a big part of the problems. He's missing throws. He can't really create plays outside of the pocket. The timing is off, and at some point Aaron Rodgers can't look to the sideline with a kind of complained face on all the time that it's other guys, because sometimes it is him. And I think at the end of the day, it's starting to hurt Garrett Wilson's progress a little bit, which is the most disappointing part of all of this. And it is bringing the offense down at times. And that's really tough for anyone to admit when you're talking about a legendary player like him. But Father Time gets us all. I think a lot of people, including myself, kind of really didn't take into perspective how serious it was coming back from the Achilles at his advanced age. And I think that's played into this as well, on top of the injuries piling up. So the reality is he shouldn't be starting going forward, but I think it's a respect thing.
Honestly,
I don't... Today is his 41st birthday.
Yeah, happy birthday. Look, I think what's wild, Connor, is that we saw him throughout training camp. I was there 70% of the Jets practices, and at no point in time, whether it was scrimmaging against the Jets defense, whether it was going up against, the Giants, the Commanders, and the Panthers, and those joint practices, not the Commanders because it was raining that day, but in no point in any of those practices did I come away thinking, wow, this is a guy who has fallen off a cliff. This is a guy who has aged like an avocado. At no point was that ever evident. He was moving well in training camp. The arm strength was there in training camp. He was attacking the second and third level of the defense in training camp. This offense was humming in training camp. For whatever reason, the games have started and the wheels have just completely fallen off. And I do believe that those injuries that he suffered early in the year, the two knee issues, the lower ankle issue, the hamstring issue, all of those things, I think have debilitated him to the point where he is just a shell of himself. We are talking about a quarterback who has not thrown for 300 yards this year, a quarterback who has fallen under 200 yards passing 5 times this year, a player who mentally has made mistakes that have cost the Jets games. The interception to Leo Williams, he can't make that throw. The interception, the pick six by Van Ginkel in the same game against the Minnesota Vikings, he can't make that mistake. He is faltering and holding the Jets back, whether it's because he can't do it anymore, whether it's because he's healthy. I'm not totally totally sure. And I remember talking to Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh when the Jets acquired Aaron Rodgers. And I said to him, are you worried at all? Because you saw glimpses of this his final year in Green Bay, and they chalked it up to the thumb issue, and that's why he was struggling on the field. But you saw glimpses that Rodgers maybe wasn't necessarily Rodgers anymore. And I remember asking them, are you concerned that it's just going to get worse, that was the beginning of the end? And what they both told me, and they said this publicly as well as privately, is that they didn't need four-time MVP Aaron Rodgers. All they needed was somebody who was 70% of the player that he used to be, and they believed that not only would they get in the playoffs, they would make a run. If they could win 7 games with Zach Wilson and borderline inept quarterback play, imagine what they could do with 60 or 70% of Aaron Rodgers. The problem is that they haven't got 60 or 70% of Aaron Rodgers. Rich Cimini tweeted this stat out. He has the 3rd or 4th lowest QBR across the NFL with names like Bryce Young and Will Levis since 2022. No team is going to have success with that. And I do believe ultimately the Jets would move on. I think maybe it is time to sit him down. That could possibly be the case. But that is not going to be a move made by Jeff Ulbrich. Not after not after Aaron Rodgers voiced such high praise for Jeff Ulbrich. He's not going to turn around and bench Aaron Rodgers. Not with the way that Ulbrich has spoken about Aaron Rodgers. That is not going to happen. How Aaron Rodgers gets benched is it has to come from above, where Woody Johnson or someone else steps in and says, look, I think it's time for a change.
All right, well, let's talk about the Jets defense, because after the game, I don't know, Connor, if you were actually in the locker room when Sauce Gardner was talking. They talked about a lot of the penalties. Well, DJ Reed stressed his, I don't know, how do you say, graciously described how he felt about the officiating. He was not very happy. I'm not going to use those words because it's not appropriate. So anyways, after blowing a 14-point lead and a 3-9 season, does Reed really have the right to be upset about poor officiating?
Me?
I think here's my quick stance on that. DJ Reed is a guy that plays 120% every week. He's somebody that, is out there trying to will this team to wins. And he's had a really, really good year, honestly, in a walk year. And good for DJ Reed because he's going to get paid again after this year, probably by somebody else. And I think it just, when you're playing well and you're losing so many one-score games, and then you look at the sheet at the end and you feel like a call or two really changed the entire course of the game. As an athlete, you are probably leaning all of your frustrations into what you can. And in this situations, it is the refs, because Reed's not a guy that's going to call out his coaches after the game. He's not a guy that's going to point the finger at his teammates after the game. And it feels like it kind of bubbled up all that frustration into the officiating, which, the Jets are an undisciplined team, unfortunately. It's the lining up in the neutral zone penalties. There was 2 of them yesterday. It's 12 men on the field. It's the reality of a pass interference when Sauce got hurt and Quantez Stiggers, the rookie corner, had to come in and cover DK Metcalf. That's not an easy assignment. I think tackling in this league is becoming more and more difficult as the years go on with the rules they make. And you look at the horse collar call. By nature, by definition, it was the right call. But as football fans and media viewers and analysts, we don't like it because he doesn't actually reach in and tackle the guy by the horse collar. He grabs the nameplate and loses grip. So I get the view of the player being frustrated, even if that's not the reason they lost, because it wasn't. But trying to kind of take a step in DJ Reed's shoes, if anyone has a right to be frustrated from this defense, it is definitely him.
I don't think there's any reason whatsoever that they should be going at the refs. I mean, I guarantee you, if we go back and we look at the All-22, we can find 5 or 6 missed holds on Leonard Williams. I'm sure that was evident. I'm sure there were tons of times where the flags weren't thrown, where Sauce Gardner was handsy with DK Metcalf or JSN or something like that. I mean, there's penalties on every single play. The maddening aspect of this one for the Jets is the type of penalties that they get. All right, you want to get annoyed at the DPI called, or the OPI, I should say, called on Davante Adams. Okay, fine. The horse collar, fine. Well, what about the play where Xavier Gibson has no idea that the rest of the punt team isn't on the field, where the Jets coaching staff doesn't have the wherewithal to be like, hey, guys, on the other sideline, their punter's hurt. They can't punt the rest of the game. I mean, this is just an undisciplined football team. They have been an undisciplined football team throughout this year, and it didn't get better when they fired Robert Saleh. It got substantially worse. So, yeah, there are some ticky-tack calls. Guess what? There's ticky-tack calls across the NFL every single week. That's not why the Jets lost, and they shouldn't be using it as an excuse.
a lot of players have gone to social media and have either gone after fans, have, put their displeasure in a lot of things. Is this if the players' public social media outbursts, do you think it's just due to the team's lack of leadership, or what do you think it's due to, Connor Rodgers?
I think it's...
Or Connor Hughes, you go.
Go ahead, Connor.
No, I was going to say, I think it's just today's athlete. I mean, it's all of us now. I think about, I remember when Twitter came around when I was in high school. Like, it was my sophomore year, and I remember wait, what the heck is this Twitter thing in my communications class? Like, but these kids now, like the Sauce Gardners, the Garrett Wilsons, the Quincy Williams, all they've ever known is social media. And when they're built up, everyone's your best friend. When they're winning and playing well, everyone's your best friend. Everyone loves you. But when the expectations were so high and the Jets have failed to meet them by such a significant way, the hate is going to be there. And I just don't necessarily know if these guys know how to handle it. And when Robert Saleh was still here, he used to tell me all the time that he would tell the guys, just stay off of it. Just don't look at your mentions. Don't do it. Because he admitted, and he told me, that at times last year and especially earlier this year, the social media influence from people hating on players, it had created a legitimate divide within the locker room where the hate that was being spewed was making guys angry at each other. It was absolutely influencing them on the practice field, and he tried everything he could to get it out of there. But ultimately what he said is that this is just what the players know. This is what they do. Very few are truly able to completely and totally cancel out the noise. And unfortunately in New York, you're not just seeing it on social media. You're seeing it anytime you turn on the radio and listen to WFAN or ESPN or watch NFL Network or ESPN or anything else, SNY, all of us. Like, you're going to hear this criticism. You're going to hear this hate. And I just don't think that, I don't know if it's leadership, because the Jets have guys like Solomon Thomas and C.J. Mosley in there and Aaron Rodgers and Allen Lazard and Devontae Adams, guys who have been there, done that. It's just the younger players who have grown up with this level of hate they're really struggling with. And I think, truthfully, it's a case across the league, not just here in New York.
Yeah, but at some point, like, I'll go ask you, Connor Rodgers, does the coach need to say, just get off it, guys? Just stay off it. Like,
that's all it did.
I know, but I'm just saying now.
Yeah, they absolutely do, Jeane. The problem is, and I mean this with all respect, because I think
you don't see this in the Kansas City Chiefs locker room. I don't feel
and what's the common denominator is that they win. And the same with the Lions. You don't hear it. You hear Jared Goff and David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, kind of laughing in the locker room and everybody laughing along with them because they're winning. And I think the reality is with this situation, and it's no disrespect to Jeff Ulbrich, who's in an impossible spot. Mm-hmm. He's in a can't-win spot, literally. Is that the players aren't going to listen to everybody because this isn't a unified team right now. Everybody's just kind of on an island here trying to figure it out. And when things go wrong, it makes you feel like you're on even more of an island. And I feel like that's why some of them have turned to social media, because they feel, when the boat starts taking on water, everybody is really looking for a life raft. And that's what the Jets feel like right now, as we've seen, unfortunately, Sauce point at people on the field during the year. We saw, DJ Reed yesterday tweet about the refs. Aaron Rodgers quote yesterday about there's 11 guys on the field. It's been trickling out for a while because they are losing, and nobody wants to be viewed as a loser. But right now, and plenty of them won't be here next year, and they want a better opportunity somewhere else and don't want to be viewed as part of the problem with this team. So it's a massive issue. It's a massive issue even on a larger scale when teams are losing. And the Jets have been losing a lot, and that's why it feels magnified this year. And it goes back to the point of not only do they need an absolute leader at head coach that they need to hire, but that leader needs to bring a staff where these guys are going to spend more time with their position coaches that, have a tight relationship with them. And here's a perfect quick example. Look at the Lions on Thanksgiving. Jameson Williams makes a really, really dumb penalty, and his position coach is in his ear on the sideline. And apparently Jameson Williams apologized to the team after the game. That, to me, Dan Campbell didn't have to go over to him and talk to him. The position coach did. And that's because Dan Campbell's built a hell of a staff. And Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson are going to be head coaches. His coordinators are going to be head coaches next year. So the Jets don't have a staff like that. They barely have enough bodies in terms of NFL actual staff sizes. So it's another issue with the Jets.
A testament you can give to Joe Douglas is that the guys that they acquired too, Connor, these aren't dudes who are just collecting paychecks. Robert Saleh had that old talk about how, there's champions, they're followers. You can go back and listen to it on Hard Knocks and leaders and all that other stuff. There really aren't that many followers in this building, guys that are chasing the paycheck, the clout, the off-the-field activity. These guys want to win so desperately bad. And unfortunately, you have created a culture and an environment and a group of players who know nothing but losing, who know nothing but being made fun of. And guys like Quincy Williams, guys like Quinnen Williams, Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, these are incredibly prideful players. They don't like being told that they suck. They don't like going out there and getting their teeth kicked in. They don't like losing to teams that they know they shouldn't lose to. They don't like starting games like they did against the Seahawks where everything is clicking and they still find ways to lose. And eventually that grates on a player and that beats a player down. And it's just humiliating to the point where you have Breece Hall with his sunglasses on, seemingly fighting back tears, blaming himself for everything, saying this was the most difficult year of his life, which echoes exactly what Garrett Wilson said last year. And eventually it becomes too much where either they start finger pointing, which is obviously happening, whether it's the Sauce Gardner, the Quincy Williams at times. Like basically no one wants to think that they're bad. They're always going to point the index finger before the thumb. That is normal in an NFL locker room. But when this culture of losing and this incessant losing just continues to pile up and pile up and pile up and pile up, guys eventually go, I'm done with this. I'm done with it. I'm out. I'm done. And it's enough. And that's probably my biggest fear for this team right now is that has this become too much where guys are just fed up and done. They don't want to be a part of the rebuild anymore. They don't want to be part of another rebuild, I should say, anymore. They want to go somewhere where they're actually going to taste success. And I think there are serious doubts, like organically across the entire roster, that that's actually going to happen in New York.
Honestly, Connor Hughes, that leads right into my next question. So Connor Rodgers, like Connor just said, do you see a lot of these young superstars saying, I want out at the end of the season? Do you see that happening?
I'm curious how it plays out. I don't think so. I think, I'm sure Garrett Wilson is somebody that is very frustrated because this has directly impacted him the most, it feels like, after playing with Zach Wilson, after playing with what's left of Aaron Rodgers. He's a guy that has been really good, and just it's hard to produce when you're in his situation. When you look at Breece strikes me as a guy that I'm going to put my head down. I'm going to get better. Breece is in a contract year already next year because he was a second-round pick, so he'll have that fourth year. And yeah, the franchise tag exists, but that's a different conversation. I look at Sauce. Sauce is a guy that was under-recruited, eventually ends up at Cincinnati. That program turned around with him. He's been in places where things can turn around, and I think Sauce takes a lot of pride in that. And I don't view him as a guy like Jamal Adams that just goes, hey, it's not good enough for me here. Get me out of here. So if any one of those big three were going to make a little chatter, although it's not his personality, it would be Garrett Wilson because he has a right to with how poor the offense has been, which is impacting him directly. And he's a guy that wants to be paid, like anyone else, as the top receiver one day when that time comes. Now they have the fifth-year option for him. So I think we're still a year away from that. It doesn't mean those frustrations won't leak out and we'll hear about it, but the team actually responding to trade chatter or trade requests would personally surprise me because this is a young nucleus that even if it's going to be a new head coach and new GM, there's still a lot of reason to invest in these guys. When you have a few good players, you need to make sure that you do everything in your power to make sure they're set up for success. And that's the mission of the offseason with whoever they hire on this coaching staff.
Those two names are the ones I think you got to keep an eye on. It's Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall. I don't think that Sauce Gardner is going to go kick in the door and demand a trade. It's Breece and Garrett. And again, the reason why I would keep my eye on those two guys is because of how much this losing takes a toll on them. Like they are emotionally despondent after these games. I mean, I think it was the Patriot game. We walked into the locker room afterwards, and all other players are getting dressed and showered and all that. And Breece Hall is literally in the corner of the locker room in his full uniform, hand in his head like this, with a towel over his head. And he was like that for another 45 minutes. He was the last player to leave. It was like he couldn't process.
That happened last night. Same exact situation.
Yeah, it's debilitating to these players, and eventually enough is enough. Now, I think a new general manager coming in could help the fact. I think a new quarterback coming in could help the fact. I think a new head coach could absolutely come in and help the fact, because I know Garrett and Breece right now have issues with what's happening under center, and I know they have a lot of issues with the offensive staff. There are a lot of issues, and there were substantial issues last year with Nathaniel Hackett. They have not gotten any better with Nathaniel Hackett and Todd Downing. These two players, I know this for a fact, do not believe that they're being put in the best position to have success, and those concerns are mounting and mounting and mounting and mounting and mounting. The one thing that I will say is, again, while all of that new blood that's going to be coming into this building can rejuvenate them, they are not players, either of them, and I don't believe that they should, who are going to say, you know what, I won't test my hand in free agency. I'll take the team-friendly deal to just get my money now to stay with the Jets for the next 4 years. I genuinely believe that all of these key players are going to be due for money. They'll be willing to talk to the Jets. They'll be willing to consider it, but there will be no hometown discount. If after what they've endured for the last 4 years, they're going to be looking for like collateral. Like they're going to want something to like make up for all of that. So they are going to try to get the most absolute money they can get. If not, they'll take less to go play somewhere else, knowing that they believe they can have success. Whether it's Garrett saying, hell, I'll go join with Patrick Mahomes. I'll go play with him. He needs a wide receiver. Let me go play for that guy. Buffalo, Josh Allen, they need a receiver. Let me go there. Like something along those lines I could absolutely see happening. That hometown discount, I think that ship has completely and totally sailed. And Connor, I think the real interesting thing is that this Jets roster, when they do hire a new general manager in the offseason, it is certainly in significantly better place than the one that John Idzik inherited or Mike McCagnon initially, then when he tried to rebuild it, and certainly Joe Douglas in 2019. However, there are major decisions because while the Jets in their cap space landscape look good right now, they don't have a quarterback, and a lot of those players that make this job appealing, they all need to get paid, and there are going to be some very difficult decisions with a potentially questionable budget to do so with.
So Connor Rodgers, I'm going to put your Woody Johnson, okay? Do you think about trading those players like the Breece Hall, the Garrett Wilson, the Sauce Gardners to start a long-term rebuild, or do you keep them?
I would not because of their age, right? I mean, there's a real world where some of the players that are going to be in this draft are the same age as a 24-year-old Garrett Wilson, believe it or not. Like, that's the world we're living in with NIL, with college and the COVID years, which is ending soon. But these are young players that could be the nucleus of your team. I think strategically what you have to do is you have to try to pay one guy early, and maybe it goes back to Connor's original point that Sauce is the guy that's least likely to want to jump ship. And Sauce has had a tough year. I understand that, but maybe you can find some common ground because if you're able to extend one of the three, that opens up your franchise tag for someone else where you can't hold out in this era anymore. I mean, the CBA that the players union has agreed to has completely eliminated that. We saw when Hassan Reddick did it. It worked out real well for him. Cost him a ton of money, and he's having a terrible year. Nobody wants to go down that road again. It was one of the dumbest decisions I've ever seen from a player in my life. So when it comes down to it, that's how you kind of have to operate. Now, let's not forget the Giants a couple of years ago ran into this same problem, and they played their hands wrong with Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley. So that's what they'll have to figure out. And honestly, it's one of those situations because of the fifth-year option that they have, which they'll pick up for probably all three of the first rounders and Sauce, Garrett Wilson, and Jermaine Johnson. They have more team control on those guys where Breece is the player that the clock is kind of ticking a little quicker on, and you'll have to make a decision on him the quickest.
The holidays are here at the Home Depot, so let's get to decorating. Find your perfect tree in our huge assortment of shapes, sizes, and styles. Like the easy-to-assemble Jackson Noble Fir, with pre-lit branches perfect for styling with all your favorite ornaments. Or the Flock Starry Light Fraser Fir, with over 1,900 pre-lit memory wire branches that keep their shape so it's ready right out of the box. Ooh. Find the perfect tree now at the Home Depot.
All right, Connor Rodgers, we would be remiss if we didn't ask you about the draft, okay? So let's start with the Jets' current rookies. In 2024 draft, the Jets took Olu Fashanu, Malachi Corley, Braylon Allen, Isaiah Davis, Quantez Stiggers, and Jordan Travis. Looking back at this draft class as a whole, how would you grade their performance this season?
I would give it a C+, and Olu is carrying a lot of that weight. Now, obviously, he had to wait to play because they signed Tyron Smith, but Olu was tremendous yesterday. I mean, the film does not lie. He was lights out as a pass protector. He's getting after it in the run game. This is a really, really promising player. I think he's going to be the left tackle of the Jets' future for a long time to come. That's a massive win. Now, why it's a C+? They've gotten nothing from Malachi Corley, who they traded up for and took 65th overall. A guy that, really you should know how to use when you look at Western Kentucky's usage of him, of manufacturing touches to get him working in space. They had no plan for Corley. Braylon Allen had flashes earlier in the year, but they have no consistent run game to utilize him. Jordan Travis taken in the 5th round. It's a redshirt year because of injury. Isaiah Davis finally got some burn yesterday, and I think he's going to be a nice third running back, third down kind of player, but he hasn't played a lot. Quantez Stiggers is a guy that's gotten some work on special teams. They want to develop him as some corner depth, and that time will come. He was put in a tough spot yesterday. Mm-hmm. And Jalen Key, Mr. Irrelevant, I mean, they cut him earlier in the year, and he was somebody that, obviously, as Mr. Irrelevant, wasn't expected to make a big impact. So the reality is when you stare at this, there's a good chance that this is a one-player class. And Olu Fashanu, I think, is going to be a really, really good one. Maybe they got some depth in the backfield because I like Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis a lot. But the Coakley pick is looking like a head-scratcher right now. Hopefully Jordan Travis can get healthy. But the question is, how have they performed this year? A lot of them haven't gotten to play at all.
Yeah, well, I love Olu Fashanu. Great kid.
All
right,
awesome.
Connor Hughes, let's talk about the upcoming draft, okay? Do the Jets have to find a quarterback in this draft, or do they do it in free agency? Moving forward, what do you think they need to target?
In a perfect world, because Jordan Travis, even when the Jets drafted him, he was not figuring into their plans as a potential franchise quarterback. He was a guy that get him in here, develop him. Maybe he's your long-term backup. You can flip him for a second or third round pick down the road. But he was not someone that this team considered, here's our future that we're going to train underneath Rodgers. It was just a value pick where they took him. The problem with this draft, Jeane, is that I don't necessarily know where that quarterback's going to go. We've talked about this on SNY multiple times. It is highly, highly, highly unlikely that Rodgers returns to this team in 2025. In all likelihood, you're going to have Tyrod Taylor as the Jets starter next year, because I don't think Daniel Jones in free agency is any bit of an improvement. Sam Darnold's not coming here. Trevor Lawrence is not getting traded. Derek Carr, I don't think the Jets are going to want any part of that. And then, honestly, you should probably try to pair Tyrod Taylor with a quarterback in the draft. But who is that quarterback going to be? Everybody that I have talked to, and Connor Rodgers, you and I spoke about this a few weeks ago, this isn't a super deep quarterback class. It's Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward, and then a very substantial drop-off between those other two. In fact, I literally talked to an assistant general manager for an NFC team who told me that he would have had these two quarterbacks, Ward and Shedeur, 6 and 7 in last year's draft class. And 6 and 7 in last year's draft class, okay, well, what are we talking about then with guys that were going in the second round? So I just don't necessarily know where the Jets are going to go in this spot. It reminds me a lot of when they actually ran back a season. They had Josh McCown, Bryce Petty, and Christian Hackenberg before they ended up drafting Sam Darnold.
Yeah, I think when you look at this group, and that's the right way to put it, how that evaluator frames things. I mean, it's just not as strong as last year, and it doesn't have the same depth. You're looking at, maybe two guys end up starting out of the gate next year in both Shedeur and Cam Ward, and I like Cam's ceiling, although you're still working on fixing some of the mistakes that he makes. With Shedeur, he's a really talented pocket passer with good accuracy, but he's not this creative playmaker that makes things happen with his legs all the time, and I don't think he's going to outrun a ton of NFL defenders. So maybe he has a better floor than ceiling in the opposite way of Cam, and then after that, you're taking projects. So the overall theme is the Jets should not just take a quarterback to take a quarterback. Now, if one of those two fell into their lap wherever they're picking, it becomes a conversation. After that, though, you're looking at a pro market that is usually very, very underwhelming, and you might be dealing with a bridge season from a Tyrod Taylor.
All right, so guys, this has been the Jets' 9th straight losing season and 14th year in a row missing the postseason. I have been part of all of those years. So, Connor Hughes, and you've been part of, I think, most. How many have you been part of, Connor Hughes? Like 6 or 7?
I've only seen one winning season. It was 2015.
Okay.
I had the 10-6 year.
All right, so what can the Jets do this offseason that would give you faith in the future of this franchise?
Good luck, Connor.
Yeah. Well, you had to. Yeah,
this is the one you go to first on.
Yeah, this is the one I go first on.
Yep.
I think it honestly. This all stems down to one thing. We can talk about the quarterback. The roster needs to get better. Pay these guys. They need to get the head coach. They haven't gotten the head coach right since, I don't know. I mean, I guess you can make the slight argument that it was Rex Ryan, but Rex just won with Eric Mangini's players, and once he had a hand in any way, shape, or form on that roster, the entire thing blew up in his face. Then you've had the Todd Bowles, that failed. Adam Gase, that failed. Robert Saleh, that failed. Jeff Ulbrich, that failed. The Jets just haven't made the right hires. They haven't had the right GM. They haven't had the right head coach. And if you don't have the right organizational infrastructure in place, nothing else really matters. And I think once they get those two hires right, their future will be bright. But until that happens, I just don't see it happening. And the quarterback question, I don't think we're going to get that answered this offseason. I don't think the Jets are going to be in a position to do that. But also, I think you could actually see a more efficient offense with Tyrod Taylor next year than what we're seeing right now with Aaron Rodgers paired with Nathaniel Hackett and Todd Downing.
I mean, I'll keep this one simple. I think you find a way to get Mike Vrabel here, and I don't think that's going to be easy. Let me make that very clear. I think Vrabel's going to have options. I think this Jets job is not amongst the most attractive jobs right now, but I think Vrabel, one of the big, problems on his way out the door with Tennessee is that he didn't have control of that roster and the decisions around how the roster, got worse because they didn't pay A.J. Brown, which was an ownership decision. If you get Mike Vrabel here, that's an offseason move that restores faith right away, because he's a guy that's going to have everyone prepared, everyone bought in. There's going to be a focus on the trenches, not just on the defensive line, but on the offensive line. And this is a team that will finally have some discipline. So that's the answer to the question. And I know everybody will throw back in your face like, it's going to be tough to get him. Well, it's time for the Jets to figure out a way to get the right guy, because they've failed at that for too long. And you need to restore faith from a fan base that has been through way too much. And I think that's one of the ways to do it. A long time ago, back in the 90s, they went through a very similar phase, and they found a way to get Bill Parcells here. And Bill Parcells turned things around really, really quickly. They need somebody that can lead the entire organization from top to bottom.
Well, guys, it's December 2nd. We got Christmas coming up, so maybe Santa can bring some nice joy for the Jets, okay? How about we hope on that, wish on that? How's that sound?
That's all we got.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we've been hanging on to that one for a while. Vrabel would certainly do it if they could find a way to get him there, but I keep hearing Raiders with that one, that he and Tom Brady, they have a very, very good relationship, and that's probably where Vrabel's going to end up at. But the one way to change everybody's mind is money, and if Woody wants to empty the pockets and truly, now I will say, there's quite a few ex-Titans coaches on this Jet staff who still have a very, very good relationship with Mike Vrabel. I don't necessarily know if they would write a ringing endorsement or a letter of recommendation for him to come on over and join them, but money talks, and if they are willing to give him some personnel control, even though from my understanding Vrabel is not looking for that, maybe they can entice him to come here. But I'll tell you what, Vrabel not coaching this year,
that might be a little more enticing.
Yeah, and Vrabel not coaching this year has actually probably been the most beneficial thing, because he's more coveted and sought after this year than he ever would have been last offseason. People really want somebody like him on their team for obvious reasons.
What about Belichick? I'm kidding. We're going to leave. We're going to end with that. It's just a joke. All right, guys. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Jets Final Drive. Once again, you can find the audio version of Jets Final Drive on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Hey, it was always a pleasure having the two Connors here. Connor Rodgers, thanks for joining us. We'll see you again.
Thanks so much for having me. Anytime.
All right, I'm Jeane Coakley. We'll see you Monday to recap the Jets-Dolphins matchup. Hey, at least we're in sunny weather next week.
You are.
The holidays are here at the Home Depot, so let's get to decorating. Find your perfect tree in our huge assortment of shapes, sizes, and styles. Like the easy-to-assemble Jackson Noble Fir, with pre-lit branches perfect for styling with all your favorite ornaments. Or the Flock Starry Light Fraser Fir, with over 1,900 pre-lit memory wire branches that keep their shape so it's ready right out of the box. Ooh. Find the perfect tree now at the Home Depot.